The TCG Design Theory podcast is part of the Booster Pack Network. For more TCG-related content, visit theboosterpacknetwork.com. Hey everybody, welcome to the TCG Design Theory podcast. My name is Jay, and today we're talking to Max Fieve, who is the art director for Equinox and the Altered TCG. And today we're going to be talking about just art direction in general and kind of some of the questions around there. So Max, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Jay, as well. And I'm glad to be with you today and pretty happy to be able to talk about Altered and the job I did while working at Equinox. So, yeah.
All right. So before we get started into the art direction questions, how did you kind of get involved in the tabletop game space and trading card games in general?
So I don't have actually a background in the board game industry. I was working as a concept artist before when Regis, the founder of Equinox, reached out to me in order to ask me if I wanted to work as the art director for Equinox. And while I like board games, I play some with my friends from time to time. I'm really not a hardcore gamer, an hardcore board game gamer. And also, I didn't play much of TCGs. I played a little bit of Pokemon when I was at school as a kid. I played Yu-Gi-Oh! From time to time because I was a super fan of the anime. And I had a friend who brought some cards when we were on holidays. But apart from that, I almost knew nothing about that specific type of game and how it was made and how to make it. And actually, I think it was good because we have in the team a lot of people who are super hardcore fans of TCGs. And it's important in the team to have the balance between people who are super fans of something and people who have kind of the new look and that you have to explain the specific intricacies of that type of game too, and they will bring like something different to the table. So yeah, didn't have really a background in board games, but I learned a lot with my passionate colleagues. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. And that makes sense, and it kind of leads me to my next question, which is kind of with your experience, with your limited experience in the tabletop game industry. I know that's one area, but, again, you being the art director, you probably have a lot more experience with art direction and things like that. So can you kind of give us a little bit of background in terms of that?
Yeah. So as I said, I used to work in the video game industry. So while I was working there, I worked mainly as an illustrator and a concept artist. So very quickly, concept art is for usually for video games or cinema. When you don't have visual references that you can find from photos and from any documents, you will create those references. And the concept artist is the designer that will just make lots of drawings in order to convey ideas to the team. And those ideas and concepts will be references used by the team, like to make the 3D, to make the environments, etc. So as a concept artist, I learned how to make what we call world building. So how will you think an environment and a character and everything that are parts of the world that you are creating in order to make something that actually makes sense in the end. And I think this was mostly the main skill that was super useful for me as an art director afterwards. And also when I was working as a freelancer, I tend to felt that it was sometimes as a freelancer, you're not really part of a company, so you can feel a little bit set aside from the project, and your connection with your coworker is always a little bit distant. And so I knew that for the illustrators I was going to work with, that was a parameter to take into account. Also, when I was working as a concept artist, I was super interested in art direction. And when I worked before with art director, I studied a lot the way they worked, how they gave feedback, and the fact that their role was not to make the illustration or the concept, but just to give you hints that would make your art better and take your work to the next level was something that actually fascinated me. And I think that's what laid the basis of my interest for art direction. And I was uh, deeply considering going from concept art to art direction when I received the email from Regis offering the position. So it did not directly offer me the position, but I could enter the recruitment process. And I think it was just good timing there. I was super interested and prepared for that, and the timing was right. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, if I must say, I think you're nailing it so far. I think, I think it's a natural calling. For anybody who has seen the artwork for Altered and honestly, just any of the marketing materials, anything having to do with the game, it's so just spot on. And I think a lot of people kind of sleep on, the importance of art direction and things like that. So as you said, you were a concept artist and an illustrator, and then making that jump to art directors, that distinction of, okay, I was doing, most of the concept art illustrations and things, and now I'm taking the work from other people and making sure it's all cohesive, because you can have 100 pieces of brilliant, amazing art, but if they're all different styles, your product that uses all those is not uh, is going to is going to look bad. The art can be beautiful, but I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's going to look amateur. So yeah, so that, that being the role of art direction, and you kind of filling in that role, um, understanding why it's so important, just in general. Is there anything that makes it more important to really get right when it comes to a collectible card game?
Um, I don't know if it's really specific to collectible card games, but when you were talking, you mentioned something that was very important, is that sometimes people tend to have trouble making the difference between just a skill level for an illustration, so the fact that it's well made, and what is art direction, which are all those little details that would make actually the illustration fit into a game and make all the illustrations and visual elements made by different persons cohesive and work together to actually make a game. And I think it's the same for cinema, uh, for for video games and uh, other productions like this. When you are making something, you need every part of the game, for example, to actually go into the same direction. And the more links you will have between the gameplay, the art direction, the lore, and every little bits and part of the game, the more they talk to each other and are cohesive together, the better the game will be, and also the easier it will be to understand the game for the player. A good example of this is that if I have a spell, it's a card that will summon 2 soldiers, for example. If I have an illustration with 2 characters on the illustration, it creates a direct connection between the effect and the illustration. And this is something that is very important. Um, so that is one thing. And when we started to work on Altered, uh, our first challenge was to actually find the art direction that we wanted to make. And so I was not alone in that task. I was recruited at the same time as my associate, Tingyun, was working on the art direction with me from the very beginning of the game. And so our first mission, was to lay down the basis and found what would be the rules that would link the work of all the illustrators together. Since we were a new team, we didn't have like a super big set of resources that we could use to look for a lot of stuff and create a lot of concepts to try out things. We had to actually just benchmark, find good references, and from there just project ourselves to what would be the final result. But we could not try it upfront. And so that's where I think the essence of the work of an art director is that you will have to make people understand the different rules that would make their art look alike or at least work with each other. And so you will have to convert abstract ideas of design to very specific rules that anyone can understand and follow. And this is important because we knew we were going to work with artists that would be from different origins, from different cultures. And if when I work with someone, I am going to say to that person, I want an image that is more colorful. The word colorful actually means nothing. It could be that I want my images to have different hues inside of the image. It could mean that I want my illustration to be more saturated. And depending on the sensitivities and the different cultures, it can be very difficult actually to talk about what you want without being able to show it upfront, because we didn't have like 100 different concepts to show our artists. And so that's when we started to work on our graphic Bible, which would be the first reference document to give to our artists to guide their work. And what we knew in the beginning was that we wanted our game to be different from the others. But Regis told us immediately that while it would need to be different, the game was super different already in terms of gameplay, in terms of features we wanted to create. We didn't yet have the specific design for the unique cards, for the QR code system, etc. But we already had a lot of the basis of those ideas. And his guideline was to say that since the game is going to be very disruptive on a lot of different topics, the art direction has to be something for people to gather upon and to be kind of an anchor point where everyone would like it and it would be accessible and easy to love. And me and Tingyun, since we had illustrators background, we wanted to do some super nerdy illustrator stuff with complicated hues and kind of arty experimentation. And he told us that maybe it was cool for people who were working in that field, but for 90% of the people that would just stumble upon the game, it would just look weird with weird features for the game, with weird digital features on top of it, and at the end the game would just look weird. So we had to do something more simple and to really focus on making something with a lot of quality that would still feel a little bit modern, refreshing, and different. And so the main elements that we took as our guidelines were to make the game accessible for everyone to understand easily what is represented on an illustration. So you don't have a lot of different little details, elements that would distract you from the subject. Like sometimes in very rare Pokemon cards, you have lots of effects. The card is foiled. You have 1,000 different elements on top of each other, and it becomes difficult to read the card. So we wanted to avoid that. We wanted to have something that was positive. This is something that we try to do in all the different aspects of the game. So it had to reflect also in the art direction. And that's why we decided to make the game also more colorful. And making the game colorful was something that was also a strategy to be different from Magic the Gathering or Flesh and Blood, or this type of game were very inspired by the aesthetics of the 90s and early 20s, with a lot of black shadows uh, and dark uh, dark lines around the characters. Um, we wanted to avoid that and come closer to something like Legends of Runeterra or more modern aesthetics that are inspired by video games. And maybe that's why also having a background myself from video games maybe um, influenced me a little bit. And the last thing was that we wanted to bring in more emotions into the game than what we had in other TCGs. Um, Usually, TCGs are a representation of a battle. Uh, you are a warrior or a wizard, and you summon creatures in order to kill your opponents. So the very theme of the game uh, makes you represent characters and scenes that are a little bit violent. You will represent warriors, fireballs, monster, etc. And on this type of illustration, while those are super cool and after games are like this, you will miss on a lot of scenes and representation that are really cool as well and that could be softer. And you miss the different sense of life, the tenderness, the emotions that can exist between two characters. And we believe that there were much more stories that we could tell if we just took a step backward, took a step back and keep a little bit of fighting and opposition in some places, but just not represented only that, but a wider range of things and emotions. So we really wanted to be able to open up the scope and um, and represent more different scenes on the cards.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I caught you saying with, um, in terms of like getting, all your illustrators and stuff to kind of come together and produce things that are cohesive to the project and that match your vision. Coming up with something that's like, here's some initial artwork. This is the direction we want you guys to go. This is kind of what we want you guys to imitate. And I'm sure, professional illustrators are fantastic at, you know, trying to match the style as close as possible. But I kind of wonder how much, if any, work on after you receive the artwork, is there with kind of just touching up some of those hues, the lights and the shadows and everything, just to kind of make everything cohesive.
It really depends on the of course on the illustrator you're working with, but also on the specific card you're working on. So related to what I was saying before, from the different main guidelines that we had in our art direction, we translated those to very specific rules that the illustrators had to follow. And those things, we explained them very well at the beginning of the work with an illustrator. And on top of that, when we prepare our briefs, we give a lot of insight and references to the illustrator to kind of nourish their brain and give them lots of ideas to start on the illustration. And on top of that, what we do is that for every illustration, before the illustrator starts working on it, we do a kickoff meeting with the illustrator. So we reread the brief together. He or she can ask any questions they have, and we talk a little bit together about the character, the scene. We brainstorm together. It's not a very long time. It's like 5-10 minutes, but it allows for the illustrator to ask anything and to have much more precise idea than just having 2 lines written in an email with a description. Um, and that little part actually saves a lot of times, because otherwise you will just spend maybe 1 or 2 days, because the illustrator will start to work on something, send you the first sketches, and when you receive them, it's not what you had imagined, and he or she has to start over. So this is the first thing that made us win a little bit of time. And after that, usually we have 3 phases of going back and forth with the illustrators with feedback. The first one is that the illustrator sends us sketches. So usually between 2 and 4 different compositions. So the sketches are usually in black and white. Some illustrators go with colors already, but usually black and white. And that's the moment when we try to correct the maximum, the biggest amount of things as we can. Because when your drawing is only still just lines, black and white lines, it's very easy to just correct the anatomy, the design, give feedback, completely change the composition. Because to repaint it, it will only take like 20 to 30 minutes. So we try to give a lot of information at this stage. Then the illustrator will come back to us with a color block. So just a basic blocking, no details, no rendering, just the basic colors, and usually light and shadow. That way we can validate with the illustrator that from the sketch, the color scheme is actually good. And as well, it's much more easy to balance the colors and contrast when you don't have to think about rendering on top of it. So you're not afraid to break anything, because there isn't anything to break yet. And you can play on Photoshop with the different sliders, overpaint very roughly on the image to suggest the light. And I think for us it's very important to be able to cut an image that is like a final illustration is something that is very complex, and you have to solve the problems one by one. And doing so helps us to achieve that, because when we do the sketches, we will get rid of the design and the composition of the image. During the color block, we get rid of the color palette, light, and shadow sources. And after that, all the illustrator has to do is just refine the details. And that's when the illustrator will put like 80% of his work and his time. But everything is already settled. And so usually from there, we will tweak little things, give little hints on how you can improve the rendering of that leaf there, of the jacket of the character with some reflections, stuff like this. But those are tiny details, and usually the illustration is already done after the color block. So yeah, it's really 80% of the informations are blocked between the first 20% of time working on it. And after that is just going forward, adding detail and putting in the time to actually achieve the illustration. I don't know if it answers your question.
Oh no, yeah, it absolutely does. It's just it's the whole process, right? Because you talked about you can tweak things on the back end and stuff, but most of it is just that organic work that's done with the illustrator, and kind of going through those phases. And I think that's really interesting to think about, especially in regards to the Altered TCG, because your rarities are are just changes in color, changes in scene, changes in poses and things just from the cards that I've seen. So you're kind of taking a step further and saying, okay, well, we like this illustration. Now this is how we want it for this rarity. This is the background that we want for this rarity. This is the faction that this character happens to be with for, on the 2 versions of like the rarity and things like that. So I imagine the process is roughly the same for those types of things.
Well, the question of the alteration, so the variations of the artwork depending on the different rarities of an illustration, um, is something that has evolved a lot during the course of the development of Altered. Way back in the beginning, we thought we would have 4 different rarity levels. So for each illustrations, there were 3 variations to make, and we realized that the 2 in the middles were always disappointing because actually making differences on 4 levels is way more difficult to make them each of them interesting than doing it on 3 different levels. And it was difficult in the beginning because we were asking uh, the illustrators to do 1 illustration, then kind of to make 2 more. And the ideal the ideal phantasm that we had for alteration would be to have 1 different illustration for each stage. It would be super awesome. But what we realized as we went by were 2 things. First, it would be way too expensive to like make 3 illustrations per card. We couldn't afford it. And also, hopefully, we realized that for a TCG, being able to recognize the card by the illustration is also very important. And if the different illustration for the same card on different rarity levels were to be too different, from a collector perspective, it would be kind of cool because you have different cool illustration for the same card. But from a player perspective, it could be disturbing and it could make the game, especially for beginners, actually harder because you don't know what is this new card. Oh, it's the same, but not exactly, and it would have been difficult. So what we did was that with the illustrators, when they start working on the sketches, we tried to begin thinking about a little story that we could tell for the alterations. And so from once the sketch is validated, we try to think with them what could be a good way to make alterations that will have values for the player without forcing the illustrator to repaint completely the image, and finding some tricks to make something quick that tells a story and that has value for the customer. And this is something that sometimes we do super well, sometimes we struggle. And I think with time going by, we actually, both us as art director and our artists as well as illustrator, learned how to manage this. And it is now going very much more smoothly as in the beginning of the game. And the illustrators often have super cool ideas of things to change and little details that could bring the illustration to the next level. And when it's not the case, we are here to actually help them. And Tingyun and I, we spend a lot of time trying to find those little details and nice ideas that would make the alteration worth something for the different rarities of the card.
Yeah, yeah, definitely make it something that's I like that you said easily recognizable. I know that most people don't play with $50-$60 like Pokemon cards, like the alternate art cards and things like that, but um you know it can get confusing with the different like variations and the different rarities and things, and obviously that is leaning towards the more collector side. But I think you guys have found a good balance with the playability of it and the collectability of it, because putting those 3 illustrations side by side and some of the displays that you guys have on your Kickstarter page and your website, um, you know it, it's not like you're making these you know pointless variations just to call it a different rarity. Like it is like a progression. You can see a progression. You can see that real changes were made, but it's kept recognizable, and I think that's an interesting thing to have to juggle while you're doing art direction. Um, now with
Just
Go ahead.
um, the this is something that at Equinox, actually, the expectation level of the different members of the team are pretty high. And it's funny because uh, it's the case for the game designers towards the art direction, from the art direction towards the game designer, to the developers, etc. And actually, in the team, we have a lot of expectations between each other, and we don't want to disappoint the game designer as art director. They don't want to disappoint us as well, and that goes for every part of the company. And so, when we started to work on the alterations, we tried some stuff, and of course, we tried to do uh, color variations. We tried to find some processes um, that we could kind of make automatization to ease the process of making variation. We thought about separating every character from its background to be able to switch the backgrounds randomly for different scenes. And actually, all of those tricks, they felt a little bit cheap, and we just didn't want it to give something cheap either to our team and after that to the customer. And I think that just having the, the the habit to look at yourself and really ask yourself, is this something I, as a customer, would think is cheap or not, is really important. And doing that every step of the way uh, brings us to something that is pretty cool in the end. But I have to say that we also see all the flaws in what we are doing, and we really want to improve. Furthermore, the rendering and the arts, and we have actually a lot of ideas to do so that will develop for the next expansions. But yeah, while we are proud of what we did, there is still a lot of stuff that we can improve, and that's cool. Actually, that's what makes it interesting. Otherwise, we would be a little bit bored. But yeah.
Yeah. And so we you talk about processes, right? You talk about kind of making things better as everybody is used to working on this project and kind of does these things. And you talked about your relationship with your illustrators a lot. But how often, or I guess I should say, how much of a part of art direction is graphic design, and when does that kind of come into play? Um, you know, with everything else that's kind of art related.
So you mean everything that is not the illustrations, right?
Yeah, so like the whoever's designing like the cards or boards or things like that, the readability of cards and things like that. So where does that come in the process, and how involved are you as the art director with the graphic design?
As I said, we are a pretty small team yet. Like we are big for board games, but really small for TCGs. And so in the art direction department for almost 2 years, there was only Tingyu and I. So all the first prototypes and uh, tests for the frames and the different graphic designs of the logos and stuff like this, it was made by us. And at some point, we had the help of a graphic designer that joined the team for about 6 months before leaving, was an expert in graphic design for board games. So he's the one who designed the logo for Altered. We worked together on the frames a lot. And as for the illustration, the way we worked on every of those elements was that we went on Discord, he and I, and we would draw together with the screen shared in order to get inspired by what the other was doing. Because if he worked on his own, he tended to just get stuck at some point and could not grasp entirely all the specific details that we had to solve. I, on my own, didn't have enough good graphic design skills to actually make a super beautiful frames or logo. And working together was the nice match, actually, to achieve something that was really cool. And usually, when he finished his work after that, I would just clean the file and make something that was usable by everyone in the company for the others. And at some point, this graphic designer, Stefan, he left us because he wanted to work on other projects, and he quitted the company. And he was actually the one that was the expert also in printing. And so he was the one who knew all the specific details about how you make a print document for the factories, what are all the different types of paper, ink, how to use InDesign to create an industrial process for exporting the cards, etc. And so he took a month, roughly a month, to teach me everything. And so after that, I took back this part of the work, aside from my art direction tasks. And a few months later, another graphic designer came in the team, and he is someone who is tied to the marketing. So he is the graphic designer that will design everything for the marketing and the Kickstarter. His name is Fabien, so he's the one who's done every visual for the Kickstarter, which are really good. And the nice thing is that he is someone who is very independent and he has good taste also. So I really don't have to be behind his back to check anything, and everything that he produces actually is super cool. And also I teach a lot from him because he is as well a very much better designer than I am. And on my side, I'm teaching him all the specs for the print files for him to be able to become the next graphic designer for Altered. So in the future, for the course set, it was kind of a mixed process because we had to, with a limited timeline, find a solution with not always the perfect assets to deal with every problem. And for the next expansion, Fabien will probably design every element for the packaging, so the booster, the starter, the display, stuff like this. And I will probably keep on working on the different frames. Yeah, I think this will be it. So since we are a little team, we are all forced to do a lot of things, different things. And so usually in the art direction team, I tend to take care of a part of the illustrators, the graphic design for the frames, and the organization of the art team. Tim Young manages the illustrators, and she helps also retaking some of the illustrations when something has to be redone, because she's a very, very talented illustrator, much more than I am. And we have also a young graphic designer that helps us making the different white plates and helps Fabien and the marketing when there is a little need. She's someone that is just here to help whenever we need something. And Fabien, who does everything for the marketing and will be handling the packaging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really, when you think about it, there's just a lot of aspects when it comes to the design and graphic design, because then it kind of gets into product design as well. You're talking about marketing materials, the game pieces, but also what it looks like on a shelf, or when someone walks into a local game shop and sees that among 1,000 different things, you need to think about okay, how's this going to catch someone's attention, but also convey the feeling and the message that we want.
And
Um,
and that's why we actually for our product in the cardback, which is a very important aspect element for a TCG. That's why we went a little bit in a different direction. That was what was the standard at the time, which was to have usually a cardback with black borders, and also the trend for the past 2 or 3 years was to have a dark background with golden text over it or white text over it. And we kind of reversed this and went with a light background and um, light graphical elements also on the packaging. Uh, this was definitely a strategy also to make the product a bit different from the others. And that was an idea of Stefan when we were working on the cardback. I think for the cardback, we made maybe 30 to 50 different tries. And the fact that the cardback of a TCG will never change kind of makes everyone go crazy about it. And really the fact that this is something that you will never be able to change in the future um, makes the decision very heavy to take. And so we we were redesigning it over and over and over until we found something that would please everyone in the company. And the illustrator that helped us achieve the final result is Nestor Papatrian-Tefilou, who is one of the illustrator we are working with from the beginning. And yeah, I think he did something really, really cool for the cardback. I'm super proud of him.
cool. Yeah. I like what you said about the card back. I've had that thought myself a lot is, once you make that decision, you're stuck in that decision. I mean, you can tell like over, the years of Magic, for instance, if you look at the card backs, they're all the same, but you can tell, when they use different printers or, materials or things like that, there's just slight differences. But if you completely change it, like, Yu-Gi-Oh, for instance, where it's just like the black spiral and the brown and then the little, Yu-Gi-Oh at the bottom, um, that can't change. So even if they wanted to add another element, it would stand out, um, you know, and be really obvious. Um, so yeah, that I can't imagine the pressure of that decision. But I'm glad you guys got it.
Yeah,
It's good.
and that's why for example for Magic the Gathering you still have the little um, pencil mark at the back. I don't know if you ever noticed, but this is something that remains. It was like an error on the first file of the cardback, and there is also in the upper left corner a little white dot that was caused by a little piece of dust that was taken inside the file when it was made. And this is something that is still here today. So we knew that everything that we would miss or forget on that cardback would stay forever. And yeah, I hope we didn't miss anything. Maybe time will tell.
I mean, it looks great. Yeah, it is probably one of the most iconic things about a trading card game is its card backs. So, yeah, a lot of pressure there, but just from seeing it, I think you guys got it right. And I think, um, with a team of illustrators and illustrators coming in at different points of the project, you're going to have obviously a lot of, you know, pieces of art that you're keeping for a set, pushing, or just not using at all. Things coming in and out and all that. So, what are the, as an artist, if or as an illustrator, if I were to submit something to a project, and obviously, I'm getting paid for it and everything like that, what ownership do I have of that after the fact? Can I promote it, display it? You know, what are there any specific details with like how an artist is represented on a card specifically? Is there any process to that?
Well, um, the way we defined it is that in the beginning of the project, we asked the illustrators what seemed fair to them. Um, And the contracts were edited a few times because on the course of producing the first illustration, uh, we started working with new illustrators over time, and some of them pointed some of the specific details of the contract out and wanted some changes that we made. And so basically, we are not very we don't really care that much about our property and the image of Equinox. Like, we don't want to put an Equinox stamp on everything that goes between our ends. Um, the deal we have with the illustrators is that when they make an illustration for us, they have the right to uh, sell copies of it, sell posters, stuff like this. They kind of, they kind of can do anything they want with the illustration. They can't just put like half change it and display something for, I don't know, something obscene and make a T-shirt out of it, for example. But otherwise, they can make pretty much anything they want with their illustrations. And us on our side, we have some time to make some slight changes to the illustration, like just to make it fit a card composition a little bit better, or to adjust an element that changed in the law, for example. There is an illustration where a character has a crown. At some point, we changed its color, so we did it directly. We did not ask the illustrator to do it because it would just take time, cost more money, while we can spend 10 minutes doing it. But whenever we do a change, we ask the illustrator if it's okay with them. And the illustrator has the right to say that they don't agree with it. And if they don't, we would remove the change. This is to protect them from, like to take an obvious example, it would protect the illustrator from cases where, for example, they create a character and we retake the illustrations, but a Nazi bracelet to the character, and we publish it like this. Like,
And then their name is on the bottom of the card, and it's like misrepresenting,
yeah.
right?
So we always ask the illustrator if they're okay with any changes we make. Um, we didn't have any complaint or trouble so far. Usually those are very obvious things. But yeah, and the illustrator remains able to sell copies and do whatever they want with their art on their own. So, and what we do is just we ask them not to publish the art before we reveal the card. Um, just because sometimes we have illustrations that were made for the core set that will be published later on because the core set size changed or just production issues like this. And so, yeah, they can't publish a card, an illustration before the card is revealed. But I think that is something that is very common in the industry and everyone kind of agrees with it. It's like in video games when you can show your concept before the games comes out because it would spoil a little bit too many things. But yeah, basically that's all. It's very straightforward.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Kind of like an NDA, like a non-disclosure agreement of, hey, after we show it off, you're free to post it on your socials and things like that. I think.
And yeah,
Go ahead.
I was saying, I think also that allowing the illustrator to sell copies of the artwork or poster or this kind of um, this kind of goodies, it's also a way to. I think it's fair because it's also a way to share the success of the game if there is a success. Because if the game works well, it's also partially because of the work of the illustrator. It plays a great deal in the love that we have uh, as a that we as player have for a game. And I think it would be unfair if the game is a super good success for the illustrator to have nothing in return. And so being able to sell afterwards um, things based on your art is a way for you as an illustrator to get a little bit more money out of the fame that came from the game, from your work.
Hmm. Yeah, and you know, talking about how illustrations and art can kind of benefit the illustrator, because a game's successful and things like that. Um, it kind of gets me thinking about just the amount of time that goes into creating illustrations and things like that. And it's hard for me, like obviously in a digital age where everything is done like on an iPad or a Wacom tablet or something like that, or vector art that can be infinitely scaled and things like that. Um, just to just to try to understand how big some of these file sizes are and how much time they take on average, and does it vary a lot? I know there's like more simple illustrations and more complex illustrations. So is there a general amount of time that you guys expect that illustrations are going to take, when you commission those types of things?
Well, I think the average amount of time an illustrator uh, like puts in an image is 2 weeks, but they usually don't work only on that illustration during those 2 weeks. It's just that they take 2 weeks to make the illustration, but they um, often have other customers. They are working on different projects at the same time as freelancers. Um, but this is something also that was part of our strategy to actually create a team of illustrators. I talked a little bit about that in the AMA that we made a few months back. We were a company that is known by no one. We don't have any art to share to actually show that we are doing quality work. And we had to gather a team of illustrators to create. Uh, Initially, we wanted to make 300 illustrations in 1 year, and we had to find a way to actually attract people, because when we started to reach famous artists from different countries who worked on different TCGs, they would not even answer our email, because we would be maybe in their email box the hundredth studio of the day asking for them for an illustration or something, and they couldn't tell if we were serious or not. And actually, in their position, it was impossible to know. So what we did is that we contacted lots and lots of illustrators, and uh, every time what we said, what we decided to do was that the illustrator would choose the time that it puts in an image, and we on our side would manage the different time zone and different um, workload of the different people. That allowed for young students or beginner illustrators to actually take, for example, 2 months to make an illustration, but have regular feedback from a professional team and a lot of advices to progress along the way. And for very skilled and talented artists, it would take maybe 1 week to make an illustration, when they actually on their own time take maybe 2 days to do it, and so they have 1,000 euros for that illustration in 2 days, which is worth it. Also, it went along the fact that we pay everyone the same price. We don't make differences based on the fame or the experience, and we think that this system allows us to actually balance the different skill levels and the different profiles of the illustrators. So the average amount of time that is put in an illustration is 2 weeks. But if you are talking about hours, I would say maybe between 15 to 30 hours of work in an image. And regarding the size, the file size and how big it is, actually, when you are working on digital media, so 99% of the illustrators use Photoshop to make the illustrations. It's not that different from working on paper. The thing is that you have different layers. You can erase everything, so it gives you more freedom and a lot of little tools that help you make your illustration. But in the end, you just have your blank page and you paint strokes of colors make your illustration. And this is the part that takes a lot of time. But yeah, usually the file size are maybe 2 or 3 gigabytes, something like this. It's not that heavy. Um, and this is something that we will reduce and process afterward in order to make the right files for the printing.
Mm-hmm. And so so the process from concept art to providing I guess figuring out right the art direction you want to go, getting those images together, making sure illustrators understand it, working with graphic designers, and also kind of keeping in mind all the different things that we talked about, like that go with it, like how the illustrators can use that art, the different levels that the illustrators are at, finding illustrators, reaching out to them, letting them know about the project. Is there anything else that an art director does that, kind of fits within that realm?
When you mean fits within that realm, you mean that just like the work of an art director, of the work of the art director dedicated to the illustration and things that we see.
Yeah, aside from the things we talked about, basically, is there anything else that an art director does um, towards the project that may be outside the realm of illustration or graphic design or things like that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that is something that is sometimes difficult for illustrators who become art directors. Actually, as an art director, you don't paint very much, or you don't sometimes paint at all, because the only times when you actually get yourself on Photoshop to draw something is when you make feedbacks to an illustrator, and you usually have between 5 to 15 minutes to do this and to figure out very quickly how to correct the pose, composition, colors, etc. before sending your feedback to the illustrator. And actually, a very big part of the work of an art director is management. And you have to organize yourself in order to deliver all the specific files, products, and content to the different parts of your company in time. And for example, right now, when we are working on the different expansions of the game, these are times where we are working on 4 different expansions at the same time. And so as an art director, you have to be very well organized to be able to manage the different sets that are incoming. So you will be working on the art direction and conception of, for example, the set 3, while you are actually booking the illustrator for your set 2, while you are doing the feedback to the illustrator for the set 1 at the same time, while also managing all the requests and things that the marketing needs for the current launch of the game. Nowadays, it's the Kickstarter. While also having time to speak with the game designers and the other parts of your company to actually keep on understanding the game you are making and being able to produce quality work. So yeah, there is a lot of management, actually, a lot of staying tuned and research in order to keep a keen eye and being able to make feedback that are relevant. I think that trends in game is something that evolves really, really fast, and it's important to keep on playing a lot, being curious, and talking with a lot of different artists to understand what they are doing, how they are doing, both on the visual aspect and on the technical aspect. And you have to find at some point a little bit of time to keep on improving on your own, because the artists you are making feedbacks to are usually like super talented, way above your skill level as an art director. And so you have also to keep on being relevant when you do feedback to them. So you have to practice often on the side a little bit. And for us, since we are a small team, there is also the fact that we handle also all the files, the export, and the proofs. And so we make sure also that everything that is produced is in the right format. So yeah, that makes a lot of work actually.
Yeah. And all those things you talked about culminate into, what a lot of people take for granted, which is the way something looks. People are really quick to point out like errors and things like that. But yeah, when it's all said and done, all of that stuff has to be managed and coordinated for something to look as good as a lot of things do, especially Altered. So a lot of that effort and things have clearly paid off. Like I said, the game looks great. Do you want to kind of go through? I asked this with Justin in the previous episode, kind of for him to describe Altered and things like that. But in your words, what makes Altered special, and why should people care about this game?
So yeah, I think what makes Altered special, uh, apart from all the different ideas that we brought to the table, and the fact that we wanted to make a game that was very different from the others and that was more modern, is the super high standards that everyone in the team has at in every aspect of the game. And something that actually amazed me and makes me proud is that the game that we imagined 3 years ago and the game that we have today, uh, it didn't change a bit. Like everything that we wanted to put in the game, every idea we had, every ambition, we actually managed to bring it to life and to make it happen. But you have to understand that for every one of those things, it was difficult and it demanded from the team a tremendous amount of work and of dedication. And um, like people in the team tend to work very late every day, and they actually can't stop until everything is perfect. Um, and I think it's just that dedication into making a game that is of the highest quality in every aspect is what drives everyone of the people here in Equinox. And this is something that is super, super rare in the team. And it's also possibly that it's made possible by the fact that we don't have major actionaries in the for the game. We are not working for another company. We are working with Asmodee, but they have only 40% of the company, and so actually no one is telling us what we have to do. No one is telling us to cut corners because we have to sell the game a little bit earlier to be there for Christmas or something like this. And we actually took the time to build something that would be super, super cool. And uh, now we have to deliver it and to bring this to an end because we have to work on the expansions and start to make a living of the game because we didn't, apart from the Kickstarter, get any money out of it so far. But yeah, the quality standard of everyone in the team, I think is what makes the game special.
Mm-hmm. And you can definitely tell. And if you can't, look again, because it's. I mean, the last time I saw a Kickstarter page, it's not like I've looked at every project or anything, but last time I saw a Kickstarter page that looked as good as y'all's did was Tidal Blades, which was years ago. Um, it's just so well put together. You can tell without knowing a single person on the Equinox team that that there a lot of passion and dedication has gone into it. The ideas and the things that we've seen from this are truly um, something that I think people can look at and get excited about, and you can see that in the results. You guys have almost 10,000 backers, and maybe you reach it, maybe you don't. I know there's like a big push at the end, but to even get that close is incredible. And I do want to mention, like, with the time this episode is going to come out, it's going to come out, I think, 2 days before the campaign ends. So if you're hearing this, it's going to be the final 48 hours. Definitely look at it and, decide for yourself, of course. But I really do think it's one of those special projects that comes along every few years that you can tell just has a lot of passion. So Max, is there any way that people can contact you, or any way that you would suggest that people kind of try to learn more about the game or anything like that?
Well, I think that when it comes to learning more about the game, you can just Google it, go on our website, and just look for um, videos and tutorials for the game. During the Kickstarter campaign, it's still possible to try it for free on BJ. And also we have a Discord server that people can join with that is starting to grow pretty big. And you will have there a lot of different informations. So I think it would be pretty cool to check it out. And for the different illustrators or people that are interested in working with us, we actually read and answer to everyone and every illustrator that comes to us. Uh, Lots of them, and I think it's part of the of the game. Are sometimes not skilled enough or just a little too young in their career. But still, I will always take the time to answer everyone, give a little bit of advices on how you can progress. And yeah, it's actually difficult to work as an illustrator in this industry because when you are a student, you don't have the level to work professionally, so you don't find any job. And at some point, everything magically unlocks, and you can work everywhere, and everyone wants to work with you. So yeah, to all the illustrators that are struggling outside, you just have to keep working at it, and at some point, if you keep on working and drawing a little bit every day, you will get there. So yeah.
All right, sounds good. Well, Max, once again, I want to thank you for your time and all the information you've given us about art direction and things like that. All the different facets that go into just the ins and outs of everything. I want to wish you the best of luck. Like I said, when this episode airs, you're going to have about 48 hours left to back the project. No late pledges. As soon as it's over, it's done. So definitely need to get on the train and be a part of something. So yeah, anything else, Max, that you can think of?
No, thank you very much, Jay, for having me. Also, cheers to Fabien, the graphic designer I talked to earlier, that made all the assets for the Kickstarter alone in 2 months. So that was a tremendous amount of work. And I really hope that people will like the game that we are making. We did put a lot of time, effort, and love into it. And I just wish that the game will work well so that we can keep on working on the next expansions and so that I can keep my colleagues. So yeah, I hope everyone will like it. And it's a good game. Go and try it.
All right, Max. Well, thank you for your time, and talk to you some other time.
See you soon. Thank you.
All right, so that was Max Fieve, the art director for Equinox, who is the publisher of the Altered TCG. That's going to come out relatively soon. Their Kickstarter, like we said earlier, is currently in its last 48 hours as of the time of this video being posted. So if you want to back it, now's the time to do that. So, but in this episode, we talked about, the importance of art direction, the importance of having not just cohesive visual elements for your game and your game pieces, but also your marketing materials and just kind of everything that revolves around your product. So, having that consistent art, having that consistent look goes a long way, not just in terms of the aesthetic of the game, but in terms of the accessibility of the game as well, for people who or maybe new to trading card games and things like that, having a card that easily flows in terms of being able to recognize the different visual elements can go a long way in helping new players come into your game and also stay. So if you like the content, please, consider subscribing and following. If you need to email me with any ideas about future shows or just anything in general, my email is j@theboosterpacknetwork.com. And you can also visit us at theboosterpacknetwork.com and our social media handles, which is at TBPN content. And like I said, if you guys have any other questions or ideas for future episodes, or if you just want to talk trading card games, let me know. And I'm here. All right. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.